So welcome all of you. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. We're thrilled to welcome you back to McGill's homecoming activities. Thank you for being here and thank you for staying so connected to the university. Our board chair is likely going to be joining us at some point, so when she does, I'll acknowledge Madame Maryse Bertrand, who's the chair of the Board of Governors. And thank you, all of you. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to get to know some of the amazing things that are happening at McGill University. For those of you who didn't hear my introduction previously, my name is Inez Jabal-Perwala. I am a three-time alumna of the university and the past president of the McGill Alumni Association. And currently, I'm the McGill Alumni Association representative as alumni governor on the Board of Governors. So I have a long history with this university and a long love of this university, and that love continues as I stay connected and continue to be really enriched by my time on campus. So it's my pleasure to be the MC for this afternoon's series of homecoming events and master classes, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce two amazing speakers for this timely discussion on AI, privacy, and the public good, building trust in the age of intelligent systems. Dr. Jennifer Razzo is an assistant professor at McGill's Faculty of Law and an award-winning socio-legal scholar. Her research investigates the relationship between discretion, data-driven technologies, and administrative law. She is particularly intrigued in how humans and non-humans collaborate, not the either-or, but how they collaborate and diverge as they produce institutional decisions and the consequences for procedural fairness and substantive justice. Amanda Wheatley is the McGill Library's liaison librarian for the Faculty of Management. Amanda is also the co-editor of The Rise of AI, Implications and Applications of Artificial Intelligence in Academic Libraries. Her research examines the ways in which artificial intelligence interacts with information-seeking behavior, and she works to promote AI literacy in and beyond her community. It's fantastic to have both of you here today, and I'll turn things over to you now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. How should we get started?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, thanks everyone for being here on this lovely Thursday afternoon and joining us for this conversation about some pretty significant issues, AI related and beyond. We're both really happy to be here, and I think what we wanted to do was to start things off with a conversation amongst ourselves, talking a bit about how AI arises in the work that we do, in our research, in our interactions with students as well, and then we'll open things up to a bit of a free-flowing discussion with all of you, because I'm sure that you have lots of questions and thoughts about the impacts of AI on your lives as well. So maybe we can start with, from your perspective, Amanda, especially working in library, like the context of libraries and thinking about information use and organization. How have you seen AI arise in your work, whether as a researcher or in your interaction with students in the libraries?
Yeah, so for me, AI really became really prevalent in early 2018. I was talking with a colleague and we were kind of theorizing, would Siri take our jobs? Would Alexa take our jobs? And then we thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if we tested this out? And we're like, let's put things that we do every day into these virtual assistants and see what happens. And we found that, the answers weren't half bad. Maybe our jobs are a little at risk here. And so we wanted to investigate that a little bit more. So my entry point was really into virtual assistants and how that affected information seeking. That became really how I got invested in artificial intelligence. And I started to think, well, if I'm thinking about these things, I bet students are thinking about these things, about where to access information and how is going to be the easiest point of entry for them to get information, and will that change from the databases that we know them as today? What will they be interested in? And then, of course, could not have predicted what would happen with generative AI and ChatGPT, and then seeing that, yes, this is exactly where this is going. Students are very much interested in getting information from these types of tools, so now I have to pivot my work to respond to that. So that's been a huge part of how I got involved in this and how I kind of see that outlook happening with students. And of course, I'm really curious about you and your entry point into artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that similarly, maybe the starting point wasn't necessarily AI as we think of it now, but a precursor, which was in administrative decision-making called automation. So for those of you who've been paying attention to the ways in which digital technologies have been reshaping many of our lives over the past decade, there's been a shift in focus. So there was a lot of discussion about data-driven decision-making, big data, and so on about like 12 to 15 years ago. And then all of a sudden, automation was something that everyone was talking about. And then algorithms started being the word that everyone used. And now we're hearing about AI or artificial general intelligence. And so my research started off looking at discretion in decision-making in administrative settings, especially frontline settings. And when I was doing field work for my doctoral research, I discovered right away that the caseworkers that I was studying and working with to understand how they made really complex decisions were interacting with and kind of being disciplined by, in some ways, a case management system that was making decisions for them, in theory, to make simple decisions so they could spend their time making more complex decisions about people asking for social benefits. But in practice, what was happening was this system was generating a lot of outcomes that were incorrect or didn't fully account for the complexity of the individuals who were coming to these caseworkers for help. And so that's where I became really interested in many of the questions that I still focus on now, including how does this complicate decision-making? But how does it also complicate responsibility, I think? And then intersecting with some of your observations, what does this mean for labor? Like, is this tool replacing people's discretion? Is it complicating or moving the discretion around into other types of tasks? And so that's really was my entry point. And now, of course, we've seen new types of tools being used in public services, including generative AI-based tools, but also older tools that still have a lot of resonance, like tools that are more decision tree types of decision-making aids. But still the same issues arise in terms of who or what is responsible, what happens when humans are trying to grapple with a system that's not doing the things they expect it to do, and also what happens when people want to try and offload the kind of moral responsibility onto the machine and alleviate their own responsibility, which I think is a complicated question as well, especially when the stakes of the decision that's being made are very high. So.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me think too about what you're saying of automation and machine learning and algorithmic, or just algorithms and all of these words. And one of the things that we try to do with our AI literacy sessions in the library is really kind of distinguish what AI is and what it isn't. And so we have a lot of conversations in our workshops about artificial intelligence as a whole, but then what are all these technologies that are actually making up what AI is? So we'll talk a lot about natural language processing and machine learning and these things being their own distinct fields, but also being under the umbrella of AI. So it's really important that we have that initial kind of basis of everybody being on the same page, because generative AI has kind of come in and taken up this space, and there's this kind of lack of understanding of generative AI kind of being all of AI. It's you know, kind of representing itself in that way. And so I think it's really important that we have these conversations with students and with community that kind of distinguish, you know, this is what AI really is. These technologies is really what we're talking about. So the automation, the automated decision making, that being its own distinct area is really important.
Yeah, for sure. How do students respond when you're engaging them in conversations about AI literacy? Do you find that they're intrigued? Do they become perhaps a little bit intimidated? What's been the response?
Yeah, I've had really great responses with students. I go into a lot of classes outside of my regular workshops. So I'll go into like a business class or a psychology class. I went into a Canadian studies class this year, in addition to the workshops that we do. And the students are all really eager to talk about artificial intelligence. The first thing that I always do is just raise of hands who's using ChatGPT, and that kind of breaks the ice a little bit. And like we start talking about it is like, I'm not here to kind of penalize anyone for using any of these tools. I'm also not here to necessarily promote any one specific tool. I'm just here to talk and have an open discussion. And once the students realize that it's an open floor and they can really share their perspectives and kind of converse with each other on it, then it really opens up the whole experience. It's been great that way.
Yeah, no, that's really wonderful. I know from my perspective in the Faculty of Law, so some of the classes I teach focus on things like regulating AI, and a lot of students that come to those courses, they're in two camps. Some of them think, well, there's nothing that can be done. We're all going to live in this dystopian future, and we just have to kind of hang on and hope for the best. And then others are a bit more critical and maybe have lived experiences of being targeted by risk assessment tools. Perhaps they filed income taxes and been audited, for instance, or had trouble at an airport in terms of all of the different systems that are being rolled out in those contexts. And so a lot of what we do is work through the questions of, not just how do we regulate, but what are these tools in the first place? And one thing I find for students that's been very empowering is instead of talking about AI as a kind of thing that's floating around in the ether, really bringing it down to the materiality of the technology. So talking about data centers, talking about energy use, the labor that goes into the systems, where things are located, and that all of a sudden opens up, I think, their imaginations, not just as to what AI is or what it might be, but also places and things that actually can be regulated, which I think they find empowering at the end of the day. So it's been of interest. Yeah.
No, definitely. In one of my sessions, we talk about who should have oversight of artificial intelligence. And is it the responsibility of our governments? Is it the responsibility of these companies? Where does that responsibility lie? And we open up this discussion with the students, and they're always really enthused, really engaged to kind of say this is where they believe the kind of ownership should lie. So I'm curious, from the law context, what types of discussions do you and your students get up to when it comes to regulation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the things that we talk about center on the diversity of regulation. So a lot of people think about regulation as requiring legislation in place and regulatory bodies that are created anew. And I try to remind the students that whether we're talking about AI or other types of initiatives like self-driving cars or things like this, that they don't exist in a law-free world, that laws do exist already. And one of the things that students in law are faced with when they go out into the world of practice is getting creative about thinking about, first of all, what are the laws that already exist and how might they be interpreted to apply to a situation. And I think that there's a lot of scope for creativity there. And so that's one of the things that we engage in the class. But another thing that I've seen kind of open the minds of students in the law school is thinking about the degree to which technologies, whether AI or something else, can act as laws themselves. And so that too gets the students thinking about the roles for them, not just in law school, but beyond law school, in terms of future career paths that might involve a kind of fusion between law and technology, thinking about the ways that they can use technologies as regulatory tools. So for anyone who's been paying attention to the debates about photo radar or speed cameras in Ontario, this is an ongoing challenge that you see a rise in local communities quite regularly. Photo radar or speed cameras are highly effective at not just gathering funds for municipalities, but at governing people. And I experienced this when I worked in Alberta at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, where people follow the speed limit by and large because there's such strict enforcement through photo radar. And I would discover that if I was traveling for a conference, for example, and needed to rent a car in places that did not have the photo radar, that I was not going fast enough because I wasn't going like 15 to 20 kilometers over the speed limit because I'd already regulated myself because of the speed cameras. And of course, at the same time, students would target these speed cameras in our discussions about law and technology as extremely unjust because they prevented them from having the opportunity to defend their speeding to a police officer because they felt like they wanted to have a human that they could interact with to convince them that they should be treated differently. And this dynamic of like the strictness of regulation through technology, but also the sense among my human students that they should be able to plead their case was really interesting. So that's something that I've been reflecting on myself, but also that I have students work through in my class and thinking about the ways in which we might regulate quite effectively for good or for ill through technology. So, yeah.
I have a similar discussion with students about automated grading. So we talk about instances where grades have been applied to students through algorithms, and they talk about the justness of that and whether they would appeal and how they would appeal. Do they appeal to a person, to an algorithm? And that's always a really lively discussion because students are very passionate about their grades. So I can imagine that's definitely something that your students like to talk about for sure.
Exactly. No, it's definitely something that is top of mind, I think, for students these days in terms of assessments and fairness and that sort of thing. I think one thing that is of interest to me and might intersect with your work as well is thinking about the ways in which AI reshapes, whether it's interacting with information, or for me, with in law, interacting with legal categories. Have you found that students, like that their thinking shifts in terms of standardizing the way that they're doing things, and that AI or interaction with assistants, for instance, might homogenize what students are doing or the way that they're thinking about, let's say, accessing information?
Yeah, definitely. This is happening a lot with students, and I know a lot of librarians are really concerned about what role do we play with students who are accessing information. Just yesterday, I had a reference interaction with a student where we sat down for 30 minutes and we went over all the possible different entry points to finding articles that they needed for their assignment. And at the end, he said, "No, I'm going to use ChatGPT."
Oh my goodness.
This happened just yesterday. And then even before that, I was in a class where a student said, I'm really used to going to ChatGPT first, looking for my market research there. How do I stop doing that and use the library databases instead? And so we started talking about building healthy habits, like information-seeking habits, and how you can kind of go about doing that, and talked about how, even though there are a lot of business databases to go through, it's really not a huge onus to kind of take on that work. You can really do it in the background of your everyday tasks. You can go and check a database here, a database there, and kind of tick them off as you go. And so we talked about reorienting the behavior away from seeking ChatGPT as a first instance and kind of going back to traditional information seeking patterns. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, this is something that, it's funny, it seems maybe counterintuitive. Like, I think that sometimes when, whether it's students or people in the law profession are turning to assistive tools, I think that there's a sense that they open up all kinds of creativity. But what I've seen in the wild, if you want to describe it that way, is actually creating less confidence or more of a hesitancy among students and even among others who were students at one time and now are working in other capacities to do things on their own or to grapple with making decisions or prioritizing and this sort of thing. There's, I think, sometimes more of a sense that, oh, that's something this tool can do for me, and less of a willingness to rely on one's abilities and one's community, perhaps, to work through the challenging questions together. And this is something that I've been trying to push them towards the uncertainty and the making of difficult decisions, because at least in law, this is not something that you can offload to a technology. This is your work, right? Advising clients, prioritizing evidence for a hearing, trying to figure out what's going to be more convincing when you're making an argument to a policymaker. These are questions for which there's not necessarily a right answer. And you try things out, you do well sometimes, other times you don't have the results or achieve the result that you would have wanted, but you have to keep kind of working at it. And so I think reorienting students to expect that this is part of what the practice of law is has been something that I've been working on a lot in my teaching, because I've seen them wanting to turn to something else to take that weight away from them. So this is, I think, but it's an interesting, consequence of AI and other technologies that's not necessarily talked about that much.
No, for sure. And that makes me think, we have all of this AI education happening now at such an early age. And so you see students really getting engaged with the topic, and they're starting to learn new technologies, and they're starting to learn vocabulary and what these things mean. And so they get really excited about engaging with tools, and then they come to university and realize that we have to kind of unpack that thinking and kind of reverse that a little bit. So it's interesting that we're both seeing that in two different contexts, for sure.
For sure.
But it feels like, as we keep going, I know that when I was building towards an AI literacy framework that my co-researcher and I put together, we looked at a lot of different AI literacy frameworks, and we found a lot in the K-12 space that this was something that was happening in early education, and there were a lot of teachers who were really on top of this. And so it makes me think, there's going to be a whole generation of learners coming up who have been taught to rely on these tools in different ways and to incorporate them into all of their work, and they're going to get to a profession like law where they cannot do that in the same way, and then it becomes the ownership on you to really relearn or have them relearn those skills.
For sure, yeah, and maybe to learn or relearn how to be skeptical, where to ask the questions, how to dig into the kind of background or the information that was used to generate a set of responses, and those kind of detective skills, or the information gathering and analyzing becomes even more critical, I think. I feel like every few weeks now I come across an article that runs along the lines of, a lawyer being at a tribunal or a court who all of a sudden is found to have used generative AI to prepare their pleadings because there's a bunch of cases that don't exist. And in some cases, returns to the court to present new material that has also been generated by generative AI, which is really not a good look for a lawyer. But obviously these messages need to, I think, be taken on quite significantly by students, of course, but also in the profession in an ongoing fashion. So this is definitely a live issue I'm seeing, for sure.
And I think a lot of librarians are really concerned with what it means for information seeking in particular. I talk to librarians who are worried about their own jobs and what's going to happen with not necessarily job security or job safety, but the roles that we play now. We're very much in a space where we know what we do, we know how to provide our services, and we know the skills needed to teach to students. And so it's kind of, well, how does AI disrupt everything we know how to do now? And how do we both upskill ourselves and then bring that back onto students becomes a huge challenge.
Yeah, I think maybe where our experiences and where our disciplines align in some way is, I'm thinking back to a conversation we had in preparation for this event about how not just AI, but kind of digitalization in state services has really changed the role of public libraries, especially. So one thing that's been happening quite a lot, and some of you in this room might have noticed it as well, is that as states digitalize and put more and more of their forms and other important interactive spaces online, Public libraries have become a kind of one-stop shop for people with complicated questions, not about where to find the latest edition of People magazine, but how do I file my taxes? How do I access this digital hearing because this tribunal is not in person anymore? How do I respond to this letter that's been sent to me and I have to go on to this online portal and enter all of this information? And what has been noted is that especially public librarians now are having to do much more than just manage kind of information and access to kind of the more conventional resources of the public library, but actually are turning into, by choice or not, experts in a much larger set of kind of information gathering and information providing tasks. And I don't know if that's trickled into academic libraries at all, if you see kind of a similar broadening out, or if this is a conversation that librarians at the university are having. But it's certainly something that is live in the conversation about digitalization in the state.
Yeah, I think academic librarians, we're kind of positioned in a way that most of the interactions that we have are very much focused towards research and the happenings of the university. So we're not put in the same position that public librarians are, but we still do get a lot of interaction from the public who like to come in, especially in the summertime. It's so great to see the community out in the summer. I don't know why that seems to be the most active time that we get a lot of non-research related questions, or not specifically student-related questions. And so it's really interesting to see that, but I haven't yet noticed a place where like we specifically as an academic library are being treated like that. I don't know if maybe my other colleagues might have different experiences. But to me, I've seen it so much happening in the public library sphere that public librarians are being treated as basically digital stewards for all of this kind of information and for all of these processes that are being transferred into an online space.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking, I don't know if we've gotten the flag for opening up for questions or not. Yes, okay, wonderful. But I'm sure that I've seen a lot of like nodding and like, like looks in the audience, so I'm certain there's lots of folks who have questions or comments, so we're happy to take any of those from each of you as they arise during our time here.